What if everything you believe about yourself, your name, your story, your struggles, was just part of a dream? What if the sense of being a separate you, moving through a world of others, was not reality, but a trance? Alan Watts once said, "The prevalent sensation of oneself as a separate ego enclosed in a bag of skin is a hallucination." And yet, almost everyone lives inside this hallucination without ever questioning it. That is why only a small fraction, maybe just 1%, ever truly awaken. Not because awakening is rare, but because we're so deeply hypnotized by culture, by habits, by fear, that we mistake the dream for life itself. This video is an invitation, not to believe another theory, not to chase another ideal, but to pause, to question, to sense, to notice the reality that has always been here. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Awakening is not somewhere far away. It is right here, waiting for you to open your eyes. Most people believe that awakening must be a heroic act, a mystical explosion, or some dramatic transformation. But Alan Watts pointed out something much simpler and far more radical. He said, when one speaks of awakening, it means dehypnotization, coming to your senses. But of course, to do that, you have to go out of your mind. Awakening is not an addition. It is not a new belief or a new identity. It is the undoing of hypnosis, a release from the spell of cultural conditioning, the trance that tells us what to want, how to act, who to be. Most people live as if under a subtle spell. They follow inherited patterns, seek status, avoid rejection, pursue security. These patterns are not questioned, they are simply obeyed. And when life refuses to follow the script, when love fails, when plans collapse, when health changes, the pain feels unbearable. Why? Because the spell was broken, and without it, we do not know who we are. What saw this clearly? The ego, the social mask, is not who you are. It is the trance. To awaken is to catch yourself in the act of being hypnotized by thoughts. It is to notice in a flash of clarity, wait, do I really need to react this way? Do I really need this desire, this fear, this constant proof? This noticing is not dramatic. It is often quiet, almost invisible, but it is the first crack in the trance, a pause before the old reflex plays out. And in that pause, freedom breathes. Imagine walking in a crowded street. Normally you are lost in thought, rushing, comparing, judging. But then, in a single second, you hear a bird above the noise. The sound cuts through the trance. For a moment, there is no script. Only life, direct and unfiltered. That is a taste of awakening. The suffering of hypnosis is exhaustion. Always performing, always protecting an image, always fearing failure. The hypnosis is the opposite, letting go of the image and returning to your senses, literally, to sound, to sight, to breath, to presence. A simple practice. Once a day, ask yourself before you react, who told me this is necessary? Is it mine or just a trance? If you discover it is a trance, you can step aside, not reject life, but receive it differently. Awakening is not about escaping society. It is not about rejecting responsibilities. It is about no longer living as if asleep within them. Bills, work, relationships continue, but without the invisible chain of hypnosis. The chain was never real. The moment you see it, it dissolves. That is why what said you must go out of your mind, because the mind, when trapped in its loops, is the hypnosis. To awaken is to notice the loop itself, and the noticing breaks the spell. The human mind loves to divide. It names one thing against another, and then forgets that the division was only a thought. We say, self versus other. life versus death, light versus darkness. And then we tremble because we believe these divisions are ultimate. But Alan once reminded us, if you awaken from this illusion, self implies other, life implies death, you begin to feel your own existence as absolutely fundamental. The illusion is not an experience of difference. The illusion is in believing that differences mean separation. A wave is not the same as another wave, yet both are the ocean. Day is not night, but each calls the other forth. The polarity is not a war, it is a rhythm. When you forget this, life feels hostile. Death seems like an enemy. Other people become competitors. Silence feels like absence. Every shadow threatens the light. This is the pain of dualistic illusion. It makes you guard your life as if you were an isolated fortress, doomed to collapse. But awakening sees deeper. Self implies other. Inhale implies exhale. Birth implies death. Far from being enemies, these opposites are interwoven. Without the other, the one has no meaning. Without silence, sound has no shape. Without loss, love has no depth. The unity is hidden in the rhythm. To feel this is not just to accept death intellectually or to tolerate difference. It is the sense in the body that being me already includes being not me. The breath entering you is air leaving the trees. The food you eat was once soil and sunlight. Your thoughts are shaped by languages and cultures you did not invent. Where then is the border? What said awakening is like waking from the dream of isolation. Suddenly you notice you are not in the universe looking out. You are the universe looking through this form. You are not a stranger among things. You are a pulse within the same current. A practical reflection. Take a moment of silence. Notice the room. Normally you call it outside, but the room holds your breath, your voice, your warmth. It shapes you as much as you shape it. Inside and outside are not enemies. They interdefine. They dance. This recognition dissolves loneliness. It does not erase solitude, but solitude no longer feels like exile. It feels like belonging. You are alone in the way a leaf is alone on a branch, distinct but inseparable. The beauty of awakening to polarity is that it ends the need to conquer life. There is no enemy to defeat, no final wall to break. The wall was only a thought. The rhythm was always whole. And so, the fear of death softens. Death is not the opposite of life. Death is the opposite of birth. Life contains them both. Awakening means living as rhythm, not as fragment. And in that rhythm, your existence feels absolutely fundamental. Alan Watts often said that real awakening is not about acquiring exotic visions or extraordinary states. It is far more radical and far more ordinary. He explained, "What I think an awakening really involves is a re-examination of our common sense. It becomes absolutely obvious to you that you are continuous with the universe. The trance of ordinary life is held in place by what seems obvious. We believe it is obvious that we are separate individuals, obvious that the world is outside us, obvious that meaning must be pursued and earned. These convictions are rarely questioned because they form the invisible ground of our thinking. Yet what if this ground is false? To awaken is to have common sense overturned, to have the floor beneath your mind dissolve, and to realize that a deeper floor was always carrying you. Suddenly, it is not abstract philosophy, but direct perception. You are continuous with the universe. This realization feels strange at first. How can something so radical become obvious? But that is exactly how awakening works. At first, it feels like a shock. The idea that self and universe are not two. Then, as the shock settles, it begins to feel like the most natural thing in the world, as if you had always known. Think of a fish in the ocean. For the fish, water is invisible. It only becomes visible when disrupted. Likewise, our continuity with the universe is hidden in plain sight. We breathe air without thought. We digest food that was once sunlight. We move in gravity's embrace without question. These are not outside supports. They are part of us. When awakening deepens, the old sense of urgency fades. Normally, we push life forward with effort, to succeed, to prove, to achieve. But when it becomes obvious that you are not running ahead of life, but flowing with it, the urgency loosens. This does not make you passive. It makes you sane. It returns energy to where it belongs. The present, practical reflection. Next time you sip water, notice how quickly the boundary blurs. In one moment, the water is outside. In the next, it is your blood, your cells, your thought. What was separate becomes you. This is not poetry. It is biology. And yet it reveals a deeper truth, what's pointed to. You are continuous with the universe. This new common sense does not erase challenges. Pain still comes. Loss still hurts. But it dissolves the extra suffering born of isolation. The sense that you must face life as a solitary stranger in an alien world. Instead, you see that you are life, facing itself through this form. Awakening, then, is not dramatic fireworks. It is a shift in obviousness. It is seeing what was always there but unnoticed. It is a return of sanity, the recognition that your being is not separate, not fragile, not temporary. You are not clinging to a hostile universe. You are the unfolding of a universe itself. And once seen, it becomes so obvious that you wonder how you ever believed otherwise. Alan Watts once described consciousness not as a fixed state, but as a spectrum, a living gradation of awareness. He asked, well, what about the spectrum of consciousness? 1, sleep. 2, torpor. 3, waking consciousness. Up to 7, light. Most of us assume that ordinary waking awareness is the highest level. We think, I am awake, I'm alert, I know myself. But Watt suggested that what we usually call being awake is only a narrow band on the spectrum. Below it lie the depths of sleep and dream. Above it lie subtle lights of awareness that most people never touch, not because they are unreachable, but because our culture rarely points us toward them. The tragedy is that we confuse symbolic consciousness with reality. Most of our so-called waking life is dominated by labels, roles, stories, and concepts. We live in symbols. My name, my job, my reputation, my goals. These are useful, but they are not life itself. They are the shadows cast by life. To awaken beyond them is to begin climbing the spectrum. What lies above the symbolic? What's described as a luminous awareness? Not mystical in the sense of supernatural, but luminous in the sense of clarity. Imagine being aware not only of your thoughts, but the fact that you are aware. Imagine noticing not only the content of experience, but the space in which it arises. This is the higher band of the spectrum, the light of awareness itself. This does not require chanting in caves or chasing visions. It requires relaxing the grip of symbols. Try, for a moment, to look at a tree without the word tree. Notice the raw shape, the living texture, the quiet presence. When you do this, you are no longer trapped in symbolic sleep. You are touching the higher light, the reality before labels. In practice, awakening up the spectrum is a gentle expansion. You begin to sense that your normal mind is like a flashlight beam, narrow, focused, useful. But there is also a floodlight, a wider awareness that softens, surrounds, and illuminates without strain. The floodlight does not reject the spotlight. It includes it, but it frees you from being trapped in it. The suffering of symbolic sleep is constriction. You mistake yourself for the narrow spotlight of thought, and so every problem fills a whole frame. Every fear feels absolute. Every desire feels urgent. But the moment you sense the broader spectrum, the light above, perspective returns. The fear is still there, but it is a wave, not the ocean. Watt's invitation is not to escape the human condition, but to expand within it. Sleep, dream, waking, light, they all belong to the spectrum. None are wrong. The suffering begins only when we believe the lower band is all there is. Awakening is remembering the higher bands. So the question is not, am I awake or asleep? The question is, where am I on the spectrum right now? This question alone shifts the ground. It reminds you that awareness is not a fixed point, but a living scale. And when you taste even a flicker of that luminous band above, the clarity beyond symbols, you understand what's meant by light. It is not fireworks. It is not ideology. It is the quiet brilliance of seeing life directly. The spectrum was always there. Awakening is learning to notice it. Alan Watts often warned against the endless chase for extraordinary experiences. Most people believe that awakening must arrive as a dramatic vision, a thunderous insight, a shattering revelation. But Watts pointed to something much simpler and much more astonishing. He said, I remember one glance sunlit pigeons against a thundercloud perceptions of the full reality and intensity of the moment. This was not a sacred ritual or a mountaintop revelation. It was a fleeting glance at birds against the sky. But for a moment, the world was not filtered through thought. It was not measured, named, or categorized. It was raw, immediate, complete. That is the essence of awakening. The rediscovery of the ordinary as extraordinary. The human tendency is to dismiss the ordinary. We say, it's just another breath, just another sound, just another moment. And yet, what else is life made of? There are no extraordinary moments apart from these so-called ordinary ones. The sunrise, the laughter of a friend, the taste of water. Each is a doorway. Awakening is not about creating doors. It is about noticing that the doors are already open. The tragedy of modern living is that people live waiting for life to begin. We endure the present in order to arrive at some imagined future, a promotion, a vacation, a breakthrough. But what's revealed that this endless postponement is the very sleep from which we must awaken. Life is never about to happen. It is always here, always now. Imagine listening to a piece of music. If you only care about the final note, you miss the song. The meaning of music is not in its ending. It is in the unfolding of each note in sequence. So, to a life, the point is not to reach the last chapter, but to inhabit the sentence you are in right now. A practice to rediscover this. Pause once a day and simply listen. Choose any sound. The hum of a refrigerator, the rustle of leaves, the rhythm of your breath. Do not demand meaning from it. Do not label it. Just let it be sound. Within seconds, the ordinary takes on depth. The texture reveals itself. This is not imagination. It is perception freed from the trance of utility. When you awaken to the present moment, anxiety loosens. Anxiety is always future-oriented. What if? What next? But presence has no next. It is a self-complete fullness. Even pain, when entered directly, is simpler than the fear of pain. Even sadness, when felt in the present, is lighter than the story of sadness. What's urged us to treat moments like we treat music? with delight, not utility. The pigeons against a thundercloud were not a symbol, not a sign. They were just themselves. And in that selfness, the entire universe shone through. Awakening, then, is not waiting for the spectacular. It is realizing that every moment, even this one, is already spectacular when seen without the fog of postponement. Life is not preparing you for itself. Life is already here. Perhaps the deepest wound in human existence is the sense of being separate. People feel cut off, trapped in a private skin, condemned to loneliness. Allen Watts called this the hallucination of the self, and described it as a sense of being an ego enclosed in a bag of skin. He showed that this is not reality, but illusion. The belief in separation is the root of fear, because if you're only a fragile ego, surrounded by others who may reject you, abandoned by a world that may crush you, then life is a constant defense. Every relationship becomes fragile. Every chain feels like a threat. Loneliness presses in because you assume you are an island, but awakening reveals that the skin is not a wall. It is a membrane, a bridge. The body does not divide you from a world. It connects you to it. Every breath proves it. What you call inside flows out. What you call outside flows in. The line was never real. Watts explained that when this illusion drops, existence feels radically different. You are not a stranger within the cosmos. You are the cosmos in a particular form. Your mind is not yours alone. It is the echo of languages, cultures, ancestors. Your body is not yours alone. It is recycled stardust, the same atoms as rivers and mountains. To awaken is to see that you are never alone. The suffering of separation is that it demands constant defense. You must defend your identity, your image, your importance. But when the illusion dissolves, defense becomes unnecessary. You are not protecting a fragile ego. You are participating in a whole. The anxiety of me against the world collapses. Practical reflection. Next time you feel isolated, place your hand on your chest and feel the heartbeat. Then notice that heartbeat is not yours. You did not start it. You do not control it. It is the rhythm of life itself, flowing through you. You are not an isolated ego producing life. You are life, producing the sense of ego. This shift transforms relationships. Others stop being outside entities to manage or fear. They become expressions of the same whole, different windows through which the universe looks at itself. Loneliness does not disappear as solitude, but solitude loses its sting. You are not in exile. You are in communion. Watts reminded us that the ego is a useful convention like a name or a map, but a map is not the territory. The self is not the skin-encapsulated ego. The self is the whole field of relations. To awaken is to see that clearly. And when you do, the world no longer feels hostile. The pressure of isolation dissolves. You were never trapped in a bag of skin. You were always aflow beyond it. The illusion of separateness was a dream. Awakening is the end of the dream. In our culture, everything is turned into a project. Education is a project. Career is a project. Even love is turned into a project. So when people hear about awakening, they immediately ask, how do I achieve it? How long will it take? What steps do I need? But Allen Watts challenged this approach. He warned that treating awakening as a conquest misses the point entirely. Watts often criticized systems that turn spirituality into achievement. He explained that awakening is not about climbing a ladder, but about dissolving the illusion that there is a ladder at all. He insisted that the obsession with effort was a disguised form of ego, the self trying to perfect itself. But how can an illusion perfect itself? That effort only tightens a knot. Awakening is not adding to yourself. It is subtracting the compulsive need to add. It is not accumulation, but release. What's compared this to silencing a compulsive questioner? Sometimes, the wisest move is not to keep answering the question, but to let the question fall away. To live this way feels paradoxical. It feels like stopping in the middle of a race. But then you realize the race was invented. Life is not a competition with a finish line. It is a dance without a goal. Practical reflection. Notice the urge to improve every moment. When you meditate, do you secretly hope to get better at it? When you rest, do you feel guilty for not being productive? This is the voice of the ego, turning life into a project. For a moment, try dropping the project. Sit, breathe, listen. Not to improve, not to achieve, but simply to be. That is awakening in practice. This perspective removes the burden of failure. If awakening were a goal, then every misstep will be failure. But if awakening is simply living openly, then even your so-called failures are part of it. The very act of letting go of conquest is the awakening. What's once laughed at people who work hard to relax? The contradiction is obvious, yet describes much of modern life. We force joy. We schedule freedom. We strain to let go. Awakening is to see the absurdity of this and to stop. Not by effort, but by recognition. The relief is profound. You are no longer trying to conquer life. You are living it. No one can fail at being. The idea of working toward awakening is so ingrained that surrender sounds weak. But what's emphasized that true awakening requires not heroic effort, but gentle surrender. He said, true awakening requires not heroic effort, but gentle surrender, allowing mind to flow naturally. This insight is crucial. Forcing the mind is like trying to command a river. You can dam it, block it, divert it, but the river is strongest when it flows. So too with awareness. When you push it, it resists. When you allow it, it reveals. We often imagine that enlightenment is an achievement won by years of discipline, what's respected practice. But he saw that discipline without surrender is another disguise of ego. The mind becomes rigid, clinging to progress charts and milestones. But awakening is organic. It comes when the mind relaxes into its own rhythm. Think of breathing. If you try to control every breath, you suffocate. Breathing works because you allow it. Awareness is the same. It deepens when you stop forcing it and trust its flow. A simple exercise. Instead of trying to concentrate, try to soften. Let attention move like water, touching whatever arises, sound, sensation, thought, without grasping. This is not passivity. It is receptivity. And in that receptivity, life unfolds without strain. The beauty of organic awakening is that it matches the rest of nature. Trees do not strain to grow. Stars do not struggle to shine. Rivers do not force themselves toward the sea. Why should consciousness be different? When you surrender into this flow, anxiety loosens. You no longer measure yourself against imagined ideals. You begin to trust life's timing. The mind opens like a hand unclenched. And in that openness, you realize that awakening was never a thing to earn. It was always a natural rhythm to notice. Another trap of modern thought is to treat consciousness as if it were a thing, a box in the brain, an object to manipulate. But what's insisted this is a mistake. He explained, awareness is always non-dual. There is only awareness. Without awareness, there is no object. This flips the usual logic. We assume objects exist first, and then awareness comes along to notice them. But awakening shows the opposite. Without awareness, there is nothing. Objects appear within awareness, like waves within the sea. The ego tries to control awareness as if it were separate. We ask, how can I master my mind? But this question is like a shadow trying to control the light that casts it. Awareness is not something you have. It is what you are. The shift happens when you stop treating thoughts as masters and start seeing them as appearances within awareness. A thought arises, lingers, fades, but the awareness in which it happens does not come or go. That awareness is not yours or mine. It is the ground of all, a simple reflection. Instead of chasing thoughts, ask, what is the space in which this thought appears? Rest in that noticing. Suddenly, the storm of thought is no longer claustrophobic. There is room around it. This room is awakening. When awareness is recognized as ground, the pressure of life dissolves. You are no longer trying to hold it together because awareness is already holding it. You are no longer trying to fix the mind because awareness allows the mind to flow. What's described is as the most natural recognition. Consciousness is not an object to grasp, but a field in which grasping happens. When this becomes clear, struggle relaxes. Life is not something to manipulate from the outside. You're already inside the groundless ground of awareness itself. The title of this reflection, Only 1% Ever Awaken, can sound discouraging, as if awakening were reserved for a rare elite. But what's would smile at that? The point is not statistics. The point is a reminder that most people live asleep, lost in habit, in trance, in the momentum of culture. They never question the obvious. They never look deeper. But awakening is possible for all, precisely because it is not a skill but a recognition. The reason only a few experience it is not scarcity. It is distraction. The majority are too busy chasing illusions to notice the reality already shining. What's would say? The choice is subtle. You cannot force awakening, but you can become willing. Willing to pause, to question, to notice. Willing to let go of the compulsive chase. This willingness is already the beginning. So the 1% is not an exclusive club. It is a symbol, a whisper. It says, most will remain asleep, but you, listening now, have the invitation. You can question. You can wake. And remember, waking is not leaving life behind. It is entering it more fully. It is seeing that you were never separate, never fragile, never exiled. It is living the ordinariness of breathing, hearing, seeing as if it were music, because it is. The question is not, can you awaken? The question is, do you want to? Not as an achievement, but as a gentle clarity. Only 1% ever awaken. But perhaps that number grows one listener at a time. Perhaps it grows the moment you notice, now, that you're already here, already alive, already awake enough to wonder. So here we return to the beginning. The dream of being a separate self, locked inside a fragile skin, is just that, a dream. An awakening is nothing more and nothing less than opening your eyes within the dream and realizing it was never real. Alan Watts once said that awakening is not about heroic effort, but about gentle surrender. It is not climbing towards some distant perfection, but recognizing what has always been true, that you are not apart from life, but the very flow of life itself. And when we say only 1% ever awaken, it is not a statistic to fear. It is an invitation. Most remain asleep, and that is their path. But you, listening now, you have already glimpsed the possibility. You have already felt the stirring. So the question is no longer whether awakening is possible. The question is whether you will allow it, whether you will pause, notice, and rest in the clarity of being that is already here. Perhaps the 1% begins with you.